All right, you're tuned in to the Central Insight Show. I'm your host, Felix, and joining me today is Holly. And we're going to be talking about urban gardening with permaculture concepts and what that means. First of all, what is urban gardening and permaculture?
Permaculture is like a system of growing things and providing for yourself, but in a way that works together and works with nature, like mimicking nature, so you don't have as much work to do on your own.
So basically, kind of like a rainforest would be, I guess.
Yeah, like think of your typical forest. You have your trees, you have your understory of like bushes and like smaller plants, and they all kind of work together. You don't see any one plant overpower any other plant. They kind of are a working system. So if we can mimic that, but using it for fruit trees or berry bushes and herbs and flowers to the best of your ability, that's going to be the best way to do that.
All right. So why would somebody want to be into this? What would draw somebody into doing urban gardening? And
Well, I see the biggest thing right now is everyone's seeing how pesticides are bad. They're trying to strive for eating mostly organic, and organic is really expensive. That's the biggest thing. It's so hard to buy organic, especially if you don't make a lot of money and you have a big family like we do. We can't afford organic, so what's better is growing it yourself because you know exactly what you put into it.
What's the difference if people don't know what's the difference between organic and the opposite of what would that be, like a GMO?
GMOs are a little bit different. Like GMOs are genetically modified organisms, so they take a certain plant and then they change it genetically.
So organic is like
organic
no
is less
pesticides.
pesticides.
Okay.
Like there's some certain organic pesticides they can use, but they're not going to harm you as much as conventional farming with all the pesticides, because there's a lot of pesticides that go into conventional farming.
Right. So a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, gardening or urban gardening, is that just like flowers and whatnot? And this is having food, obviously
Yes.
vegetables and everything, fruit trees, right?
Yes.
And putting all this stuff in your yard. So if you're in a position where it's like I can't put any trees, I don't know how to start even
Well, you
planting
can
trees.
you could even do trees in pots, like citrus trees. There's dwarf fruit trees of like almost every kind, and you could do that on a scale of like if you just have a patio or like a little area with some sunlight, like a little balcony, you could do something, just something to help your grocery bill out a little bit.
Right. And I think that needs to be stressed too, is like what permaculture actually is like you said, it's permanent culture.
Permanent agriculture.
Permanent agriculture.
Yeah.
Okay. And that I think it needs to be stressed a lot that it's gonna sustain itself.
Yes.
And you can pretty much feed your family
Yeah.
off of this.
And the more you do, the more you can sustain yourself. But if you can only do a little bit's better than nothing. So we have a small, like a 9,000 square foot urban plot that we are starting to transform and grow as much fruit trees and plants as we can, just for what we can where we're at.
And would this also go into like sustaining with, like if you like to eat a lot of meat, or if you want to have your own, like how would you water all this? Like kind of going in towards the direction of living off the grid.
Yeah.
So to speak.
You can also collect rainwater on your property from your roof. It's pretty easy. You get like food grade barrels and get your system, your like gutters connected to the barrels, and you just try to collect as much as you can, and you can use that for your irrigation in your garden. Because I know in California it's really hard with water. Like you try to get the most you can, and you're gonna set up your garden in a way where it kind of catches the water before it gets to the street or gets to the sidewalk, so you can keep it there in your land and your property.
And making sure the irrigation system and everything, your piping is all clean and everything.
Yeah.
But I tripped out on this because I knew that there was people that actually did collect in these barrels and everything, and they were saying that it was illegal.
It used to be illegal, and I believe now it is not illegal in California. There are certain states that it is still illegal, so you have to check and make sure your city is okay with it as well.
So like, why would a county or a state or anything, why would they want to make something like that illegal? It's like rainwater,
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe
something in the water.
Something they want to control. Maybe they want to make us pay for our water more. I don't know exactly what What would?
It's a trip.
Yeah.
Something that comes out of the sky and it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I know. How could it be illegal? It's interesting. And a lot of people are moving towards like front yard gardens too, and that is illegal in some places as well.
Right.
The
So
front yard gardens.
so like here in California, like you said, there has been droughts. There's been months and months and months and even winter months where there's no rain, no water, and could you be able to put something in there like maybe native plants or trees or whatnot that would continue to give off fruit and without water?
Yeah, or you want to you a big thing too is to mulch. Mulch is the biggest thing because you want to keep that water moisture in the ground. If you don't, you're just evaporating all that, especially in California where water is really precious. So
Mm.
if you do plant like native flowers to bring in your pollinators and stuff, those do really well with the drought and less water. So like salvias and things like that nature are going to do really well, and they're going to bring in
Right.
pollinators
And
and
salvia, that's not the stuff you smoke though.
no, it's a different one. It's a group of plants like that have flowers. There's all kinds of salvias.
Man,
It might actually be in the same family, but it's not
Yeah.
the same exact thing.
if anybody doesn't know what salvia is, before pot was legalized here, a lot of people say that's the legal pot to go to, and this stuff will trip you out. Like I've heard of people thinking that they were like falling out of their chairs and everything. So
Yeah.
it's a trip. But anyways, and mulching too. There's been times where I've like unintentionally had a mulch pile. You know,
Mhm.
I've like had grass clippings and whatnot, and it starts to catch fire.
Oh yeah.
So
You have to.
like, how do you avoid that if you're like a beginner and you're like collecting?
You wouldn't want to mulch with like straw or grass or anything here. You'd want to do like wood chips or leaves, like stuff you want to make sure would stay moist and hold that in as well. And you don't want to just have a pile. You want to spread it across and maybe like 5 inches or so.
Right. And like mulch is basically like, would it be, food? Could you use food like eggshells and stuff like that, or would you just want to stay with plants?
If you could mulch with like plants if you cut them down too, but you'd probably not want to do mulch like for food as like food for mulch as much. Like you'd want to do wood chips from like for example, we go to a local arbor company and they bring us all their mulch that they cut down trees and it has everything in it, the leaves and seeds and berries, which sometimes is a bad thing, but
Right.
usually is not.
And so mulch is like something you would use to keep the soil or your ground.
Yeah, and you want to do like a good
Usable.
like 5 inches, especially around here.
Yeah, because around here you got, like I said, there's so many droughts and everything that the ground becomes like cement hard,
Mhm.
and that's how it was growing up. At the house was, I grew up with my grandparents, and my grandpa had this on the side of the house, like a big lot, and pretty much like rototilled it all the time. So we're fortunate enough to have those types of tools and everything to where he can make the irrigation lines or whatever and keep the ground to where we can have a whole garden out there. And plus we had the fruit trees in the front of the house. And then we
Mhm.
had like vegetables on the side, and then we had, like the rows and all that my grandma put in there and everything. But to people who don't have the space or they don't have the right equipment to go and rototill
Yeah.
the
Well, actually, rototilling is not the best thing because there are microorganisms in the ground that have this energy that when you rototill, yeah, you're going to get all that energy towards your plants and everything, but it's not sustainable. It's going to disappear eventually, and you're going to be left with dead soil. But if you actually put in we sheet mulch, we put cardboard down, and then we do a layer of mulch, and the cardboard will eventually decompose, but it will regenerate the soil underneath. So you're not going to have that compacted hard ground that the water's just going to run off of. You're going to have it absorbing into the ground and where you want it to be in your plants, in your trees.
Right. So what about like keeping the bugs away and like pesticides and all that? Is there a way for like permaculture to
Yeah. Permaculture actually uses guilds, plant guilds or tree guilds, they're called, where you're using a group of plants to benefit each other. So you would have like an apple tree, then you'd have an insectatory plant, like something that would make the bugs go away or get confused, like the smells. You would have like, you could use rosemary is a good one. Cilantro, they don't like those smells, so they will kind of get confused, and that helps the predators like attack them easier.
Right. And then your ground won't be all saturated with pesticides and
Yes,
whatnot.
exactly.
These crazy things, man. So I know a lot of people probably in like, I mean, I've heard it before. People in really dense urban areas kind of trip out on the fact that how are we gonna ever do this when we live in a high rise or apartment? Or a lot of people in LA are like, man, everybody up north are a bunch of farmers,
Yeah.
and they kind of not even come up with jokes and everything. But so I told you guys we're a bunch of farmers over here talking about urban gardening.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing is that you can actually do this stuff in the high-rise apartments and all that.
Yes.
And they're like, well, how are we going to do that? So we got pots with trees in there or whatever.
Yeah.
But
even some citrus you can have indoors in a pot.
so citrus, and like, well, how are we going to sustain off of citrus
Yeah.
and all this?
Exactly.
Or how are we going to sustain off of things hanging off of the window? That's when the whole community
community gardenings are
and
the best thing for that. If you can get a plot in the area and everyone works together, or get a system of community gardens where they can trade food with each other, that's going to be the best thing for that kind of situation.
Yeah. I know up there in Woodlake, and that's like 15 minutes from where we're doing the show, they got the botanical gardens, and that's the place where I usually just kind of walk through and everything, and have been told that you can pretty much have anything off the tree. I don't know if that's true or not, where you can just go ahead and take some fruit or whatnot. Yeah, no, he's stealing it. Anyways, I always trip out on that. Like, if this was actually a working community garden here where people could come in and add to it,
Yeah.
how well that would work.
There are systems, too, that you can put in so many hours into a community garden, and you can get a box of the produce that comes out of it. And there's systems to do that. Like, a lot of communities are leaning towards that.
And it wouldn't just be like a temporal thing or like just like seasons. I mean, we're talking permaculture, so you would pretty much like have a crop all the time, right?
Especially where we're at here in California, you can grow all through winter because our winters are very mild. So right now I'm growing cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, sugar snap peas, cilantro. There's so many things you can grow in the wintertime here that most other places you can't.
Yeah. Man, I've actually had a meal from things that were grown in the backyard, like a full, 4-course meal or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, there was protein. There was I don't know what all was in there, but man, it was good.
Yeah.
And there's people that trip out. Well, I'm not vegetarian or I'm not a vegan and everything. I gotta have my meat.
Yeah.
So can that kind of work with the?
Yeah, especially like if you're like in a suburban area with a little bit of a backyard, you can, for example, Exeter, you can get 10 fowl in your backyard. You can have chickens or quail or even ducks, and they will also work with you in the garden to eat the bugs that are in there, scratch up the ground a little bit to help spread some of the mulch around, and they are good workers. And you also get eggs, and you can get meat from them, and rabbits as well.
So that's another thing I tripped on. Like I said, we had that stuff growing up.
Mm-hmm.
We had rabbits and chickens and all that, and then they were telling me that no, this stuff is outlawed here now. You can't have chickens in this city. There's too many people that they don't even want chickens. They don't want the smell of chickens, especially roosters.
Well, you cannot have a rooster in town, but you can have chickens.
I know a lot of people got roosters.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing with them, but so hopefully this benefits somebody who's looking into getting into urban gardening, self-sustainability. You want to like maybe cut back on the grocery bill or whatnot, and what about like seeds? I mean, where would you start? Like
Seeds?
If you're like you're not into this at all, but you're like, I want to get into it. How would a person start this, in this direction?
This way of life. Yeah, try to grow something. There's also a lot of things you can buy from the grocery store that will regrow in your windowsill if you just experiment with that a little bit. Like green onions will grow back once you cut them if you keep the roots, as well as celery and a few other things. Like if you just want to like dip your toe in it a little bit of how to grow something easy, just take those things and see how you do with that, and then work with some seeds and see what comes from that. It's just little baby steps to get towards that, and that's how I started, just growing something. And then there's something about growing your food from seed that just is so awesome. When you get to that point, you're like, I grew that, I grew that, and now we're eating it. It's an amazing feeling.
Like, what led you into doing that though? Like doing this type of a thing.
Well, a lot of documentaries that I've watched about our food, where they come from, all the pesticides, and just knowing that this can't be good. Pesticides can't be good for you.
Right.
Like, we need to go back to a little bit more of a natural way of living, and maybe like our ancestors who grew things.
Yeah, I was gonna say this way of doing it probably goes back, medieval times or plus,
Yeah,
And,
Native Americans did it for
yeah,
their
I
whole,
mean, you get up and you put in the work, but a lot of people are probably saying, "Well, I don't have the time," or "It's just easier for me and everything." But
yeah.
what's more rewarding too, and in the end, what's
Mhm.
better? You know what I mean?
And when you work with a permaculture system, once it's a lot of work in the beginning to get it started, but once you get it set up and started in a way,
Exactly.
it'll take care of itself. You just have to like do minor maintenance and harvest once you set it up.
That's the key thing about this permaculture is that it's gonna continue on. It's like once you
Mhm.
get the wheel in motion, and it just kind of, snowballs, I guess. from there.
Exactly. Like, we don't have to maintain nature, do we? Like, we're mimicking nature. So this is, if you work with nature in a way that you don't have to put in so much work, it's going to be the best.
Probably better for body and mind too.
Yeah,
honestly.
and
Get you
it's
out
going
there.
to help the wildlife around here too, like bring them back. Like, we don't see hardly any frogs anymore.
That's right.
So if you like set up a little tiny pond and made it habitable for frogs and other creatures, you're going to help that, and you're going to balance your system in your yard to where you won't have a lot of bugs or a lot of a certain thing that is going to ruin your yard or
So I was
ruin your food.
wondering about that too, because a friend of mine had a koi pond out in his it was a garden, but it was more of a just chill garden or whatever,
Mhm.
Nothing edible out there. But he had a just giant koi pond, and raccoons would go in there or something at night. I don't know what it was, but I'd hear them out there because this was kind of out in the country,
Yeah.
And they'd, next morning I go out there and there's a giant koi gone, giant koi fish gone.
Mhm.
And then I start thinking, man, if this big of a pond is there, like, what if we could throw some fish out here and then actually kind of like farm fish or
Yeah.
something in a way?
You actually can do aquaculture, it's called, with fish, and the fish will benefit too if you put in a system of growing food, because the fish will eat the bugs and all the other stuff that is going to be bad for your crops or whatever you grow. And then you can grow like water chestnuts, like certain things that people don't normally know that you can eat in the water.
Yeah.
And there's lots of benefits to that because it has more nutrients than we don't get normally.
Yeah, probably don't know that the water that fish live in is probably more. It has more nutrients in the water
Mhm,
too. Grow these
yes.
things. I knew. I've done that with fish tanks before.
Yeah.
But
Because then you could filter the water with plants, and then it's just a cycle that just continues. Like, the fish water feeds the plants clean the water, so the fish aren't in dirty water constantly. It's like a nice cycle of life.
yeah. All right. So there you have it. Permaculture, urban gardening, the benefits of everything, how you can get started. Just basically start saving up the seeds, I guess. I mean, right?
Yeah, and get together in your community, find somebody who has seeds, swap seeds, like figure out what you can do to help each other. It's the best thing, figure out a way to get a community together. You could also start a community compost pile and have people in your community bring their kitchen scraps, and you could turn that into compost for your garden, which you need to do like twice a year, add compost to your plants and stuff. So if you could do stuff like that, it's an amazing benefit. The food scraps don't go into the landfill where they just sit there, because they don't compost in the landfill like they will in your compost pile. They just sit.
Like, what food scraps would work though? Would meat, like, you wouldn't want to put like meat?
No meat, no eggs, but mostly anything but onions, or you could even do eggshells. You could do stuff like that. Coffee grounds, any of your leaves from your cabbage or whatever. Pretty much, there's just like a few that you can't, like onions and meat and
like produce, like milk products.
yeah,
ice
no
cream stuff.
no milk products. Mostly, you just think plants.
Yeah.
That's the best.
I think if it's gonna start reeking out here, don't put it in there. Basically,
you could do onions too, but
like cheese and stuff like
yeah.
that. Out there in the summer, oh man.
Yeah, that'd be horrible. And you want to make sure you cover it. You're not just leaving it to the elements. So cover it with some leaves when you do it.
But how would you avoid that from like burning up and stuff?
Burning. You have to turn it every so often too, so you make sure it doesn't get too hot and cause a fire.
Serious.
Especially here.
Yeah, triple degree weather.
And you want to moisten your pile a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen trash cans catch fire. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
seen
definitely.
It tripped me out. and another thing too, because I was a ranch hand. You know, taking care of I guess you'd call it a farm, whatever, ranch, and they had chickens. I'd go out there and I'd I'd make sure the place was watered down. Basically, I'd make sure everything was watered. Make sure that because I put hay out there and I put grass clippings and everything, and even that would catch fire. I mean, we're talking just a couple inches off of the dirt of grass clippings and everything for the chickens, and it would catch fire. People who aren't from here are probably tripping out.
Yeah.
It's like the place just catches on fire, randomly, like just spontaneously combusts out in California. But yeah, it kind of does happen like that sometimes because it's so dry and it can just, the heat just bakes. I don't know. And then plus the chemicals that are in some of these plants so that, when they mix and whatnot, I guess that's what causes it.
When they're dry, especially.
Yeah.
But a good counter to that is cover crops. Like making sure over your mulch you have a cover crop of clovers or different beneficial cover crops that will, keep moisture in their leaves so they don't catch fire. They're gonna cover a big area, like creeping thyme, different things like that. So you try to plant as densely as you can, as much plants as you can, and that will hopefully protect against dry areas.
Yeah. Plus, you'll probably have privacy.
Yes, exactly.
Keep your place cooler.
We have a parking strip between the sidewalk and the road that we plant fruit trees, and eventually those will get so big that we'll have a nice screen of privacy and all that fruit from the trees.
Right on. All right, you've been listening to the Central Insight Show, and my guest Holli today talking about permaculture and urban gardening. Thanks for tuning in.